Okay. Sorry, say that again? Sorry, say that one. Oh, there's a Sudoku project that's totally optional. You don't have to do it. But if you want to stay while you have like the dual monitors and stuff and work on it and ask questions that you might come up, feel free to do that if you finish the workshop early, like any of these things.
And where does that be?
That should be under workshops. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And if you want to like send me your code to at any point, like I can leave comments or like critique it. I'll be nice, but you know, harsh. Okay, cool. So today we are going to be talking about objects. Objects are like a thing, but also there's the objects with the curly brackets, so like arrays, they can store one or more values. They can also be empty, actually. And they're written with curly instead of the square brackets of like the arrays. Instead of it being an array where you access it with the indice of like 0, 1, 2, you have key value pairs. So hello will be the key and world will be the value. And we'll talk about accessing it with the keys and everything. The keys are always going to be strings, but you don't have to write them as strings. Just like up here, where it's just written as hello, you don't need to wrap it in quotes. JavaScript will do that work for you. But if you put a space or something funky in the key, which I don't recommend, camel case, make it a variable name kind of convention, you do need to wrap it in quotes. Objects are like dictionaries, and actually in a lot of languages, this data type is called a dictionary, like in Python. You can think of it as you're reading a dictionary. The word is the key, so you look up the word in the dictionary as the key of like, these are all, before is hello, and then you get the definition or the value. It doesn't have to be a string as the value. You can have any data type as your value. You can have, you know, another object, an array, a number, date, time, regex, but the key will always be a string. Yeah, it can hold any type. So in this one, it's a nested object, and this object is the value. Here's a string, here's a Boolean. The key is a string. This value is an array. So objects are super useful because you can store any data types in there and as many of them as you want, and it can be as nested as you want. You can have crazy objects and objects and objects and objects and objects that go on forever. I don't fully recommend that just because then it's like a really big object, and then transporting it around is hard and accessing the things is hard. But it's definitely possible to have it nested as much as you want. There's two ways to access the value in an object with the key. I'm going to show you an example, or I'm going to show you a lot of examples because it's much clearer. So we have this object duck. And it has a name with the value Delilah as a string, feather count with the value 100, is swimming has the value true, and related animals has an array of related animals. So one way to access a value in an object is with dot notation. So we would go var duck name and set it equal to duck.name. So the dot notation is you say the object name, you put a period, and then you say the key name. And we can console log duck name. And that should give us the string Delilah. You can also just straight in the console log access it. You know, you don't have to assign it a variable, but it's nice to, if you're accessing something in an object, assign it a variable, because most likely if you're accessing it once, you might want to access it multiple times. The way dot notation works is it will take whatever this is, coerce it into a string, and then try to find that key in the object. If I put something here that's not in the object, let's say last name, it's not in this object, it's going to give me undefined. But yeah, and you don't have to put quotes around it. Dot notation will work in most cases, but it doesn't work in all cases of like trying to access a thing if you have a variable name. Bracket notation works in all cases. So if you're trying to access an object, it's not really accessing what you think it should be, try switching from dot to bracket notation. So if we say duck feathers is duck, bracket, and then we have the feather count. So bracket notation, you have the object name, open bracket, just like how we're accessing an array with the indices, but instead of it being the indices of 0, 1, or 2, we have the key, and then we have end bracket. So we should get the number 100. Feather, duck feathers. Did I spell it wrong? Feather count is not defined. Let me see. This is so weird. Oh my goodness. Because it's looking for a variable name called feather count. So one thing to know, which slipped my mind just now, was you need to wrap it in quotes to access it, because it's going to be evaluating whatever is in here. So that's why bracket notation works. If we had, for anything, if you use it correctly, so if you have like var variable, or no, feather string, and set it equal to feather count, you can put this string or this variable in here, and it will put in the string within the brackets. So yeah, if you get one of those, you're like, it's defined, like I just went through, remember to wrap it in quotes. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you explain the logic behind that? So because feather count is a property of the object, it's not actually a variable, like in quotes, consider a value of quotes.
Yes, so it will coerce it'll evaluate whatever is within the brackets and make it, like, it'll try to find it here, but scope-wise, feather count is within this object, but we don't have access to, like, var feather count equals feather count. We have to wrap this in quotes. I don't know if that... So... Say that one more time.
If we console log feather count in quotes.
Yeah.
So like the quotes are allowing the computer to access the property that's inside of the object.
The quotes is making it a string, which a key is always going to be a string, and the bracket notation, once it is a string, it tries to find the matching string under the hood. So it's like taking this feather string, it evaluates it, which returns feather count, and then it goes through duck and sees which key matches this one does, so it's going to return the value.
Okay, what if we had another object that also had a property called feather count in it?
So you do the bracket off of the object name, And you can't have two duck variables that are objects.
So is that like a feature that it automatically turns when you declare the properties? It automatically turns them into strings even if you don't.
Yeah, that exactly.
But technically you should do it.
You don't have to. It will, JavaScript under the hood, when you make an object, will turn all of the keys into a string. And most people don't put strings around it unless you're using some special characters or spaces or something where you need them. One thing to note is an object is full of unique keys, so you can't I can't have another name down here because here it's yelling at me saying duplicate key name. So you can only have one. You can only have unique keys in your object, but values can be the same. I can say name2 is true, and it's fine with having two trues in here. It just cares about the keys. One nice thing about bracket notation is you can do some funky thing, but you can do more within the brackets than just having strings in there, because you might want to dynamically make your keys you're searching for in the object. So I can have like feather func and set it equal to a function that returns the string feather count. Return feather count, which this isn't like a super useful function, but is demonstrates that you can like make the keys dynamically made, and then you invoke feather count, which this will become the string feather count because it returns this string, and it should still be able to get 100. But you can't do that for dot notation. I can't say var duck name2 is, and make this name is duck dot feather count invoked. It won't know. It's going to think that this is a method. Dot notation, it will take whatever you put after it and just wrap quotes around it. Like it's not going to evaluate it. So duck.featherCount is not a function. So that's why when in doubt, use bracket notation. It just makes your life easier. But dot notation looks cool. So play with both, and sometimes you'll have to use bracket notation.
In real world, which one do you use? And do you put quotes around your bracket notation, or would you make a variable like you did earlier that's equal to the string?
It depends. In the real world, I think I probably use dot notation if I know exactly what it's going to be. But bracket notation is always safe, and you're never going to have an error being thrown and, you know, pop up, like have a bug pop up with it. So it's nice. I think I use a mix. Like if I'm ever iffy on like, I know I'll probably have a dot name on an object if I'm like working within like a user object. But maybe I won't have a feather count yet in that object because I haven't gotten to the point where I've added that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then does bracket notation work similarly to arrays? So I can add to an object by putting an array property.
Exactly. Yeah. And we'll go over creating objects and adding to them next. So yeah, dot notation, bracket notation, it's the way to look up what a value is. Whatever is within the brackets is evaluated, and then used dot notation is just whatever that string would be. As before, you can't use the variable name with dot notation because it's not going to know that you want dot hello. But you can do that in bracket. Variables is key names. That's really nice if you're trying to make a key dynamically. Let's say you have like person 1, person 2, person 3 in your object. You would be able to have a for loop that creates the string person plus I to look up each of those people without having to hard code that in. A few things to note real quick about objects. Objects don't have a dot length property the way arrays do. Well, they don't have one and arrays do. So that's one thing to keep in mind. We'll go over looping through arrays tomorrow. And the order of your object is not going to be guaranteed every time. The way an array will always be in that same order every time. Yes, I think that's... Okay, creating objects. If you know all the values of an object going into it, using an object literal is easy and quick. That's what's up here. Var duck equals open curly, and then I just have the key value pairs written, and then end curly. So if I wanted to create var favorite pond with an object literal, I would create the variable name and the curlies, and let's say I want the name to be full stack watering hole, the length of the pond to be 50. The way you write an object literal key value pairs is you have the key, then you have the colon, and then you have whatever the value is. And it's separated by commas. Again, this can be wrapped in quotes, and it's fine, but you don't necessarily have to do that. JavaScript will do that work for you. Oops. And then if we console log out favorite pond, it is created, and we can play with it. Cool. We can also add and you can create objects with assignment. So you can create an object that's empty as well. If I comment out both these lines, it'll just be an empty object. So you can create an empty object and add to it as you get the values, because maybe at first you know you're going to have a user, but you don't have any values yet. You need to, go to the database or go to Salesforce or whatever you're getting the information from to populate that object. So if we wanted to add to favorite pond, maybe we want to add what state it's in. There's two ways to do it, just like looking up a value in objects. You can use dot notation or bracket notation to assign values. So I can say favorite pond dot state equals New York City. And then if I console log favorite pond, it will now have state as New York City. You can do the same thing with bracket, and just like looking up, it's the same rules that follow. So bracket, quote, quote, end bracket. And this will add state to the object. And with dot and bracket notation, as before, dot notation, you need to have that key known when you're using it. It's not going to evaluate a function or something. It's just going to take that value you give it and put it in quotes. Bracket notation, if I have a function key maker and it takes a number, and then it returns val plus num. This will return something like val1 or val5. Oops. And then if I want to favorite pond bracket keymaker with the num5 in it and set it equal to this is a value. Then when I console log favorite pond, it will now have this key value pair with key. This won't be the key will be val5. So, but you can't do that with dot notation. So keep that in mind, especially in today's workshop, the different uses and limitations of dot notation.
So this is going to be like something that we would use for an application to have our, like a person's name and log in, and we give them like an object value, and when they add like their name and their birth date, it would be the keywords in it, and then like the age would be whatever age.
Yeah, exactly. And if you see like JSON, a lot of times like things spit out JSON to you or something, that will be like an object. Yeah, you could, when someone logs in or creates an account, they'll give you like their name, age, phone number, email, and you can add each of those things to an object that represents that new user and send that to the database or something. Okay. Yeah, objects are super useful when you have that key value matching and the order doesn't matter. Like with a person, it doesn't matter if their birthday is listed in the object before their name, because the UI will take care of the order for you by grabbing the name and displaying it there. Yeah. Creating an object with assignment. You can create an empty object, and as you get the user's qualities or the pond's qualities, you can add it. You can do dot notation. You can do bracket notation. Both work great. Properties and methods. You'll hear these words a lot. Practice using them when talking about an object for sure, because the more comfortable you get with using them, the better you'll feel. Especially when reading articles and documentation. Property is like a value. When we had length is 100, that is a value. A method is something is a function that's attached to the object, and you can call that function on the object. And you invoke it just like you would the array methods that we were playing with yesterday of index of, and you invoke it off of the array. So if we wanted to, so we have we've been seeing all of these are properties. The name is a property on duck. If we want to access it, we don't invoke it. We just say console log duck.name, and you don't invoke it. But if we had a method, maybe function quack that console logs quack quack, and then we add that to our duck like we were before with dot notation or with bracket notation. Duck.quack equals quack. Here I know what I want to name the key, so I can just do dot notation. So if I console log duck, I should now see that function as one of the methods on it. So now we have name, feather count, all the properties, and then quack, which is a function. You're not going to see the full function printed out necessarily when you console log it, but you can access it. So what I can do is I can say duck.quack and I invoke it just like any other method, and it will run this function for me. And I can put as many methods as I want, do things with it. Maybe I want to have a thing that makes the name fancy. Actually, we're not going to go that complicated today. We'll go more complicated with them tomorrow. But you can put functions in your objects, and it's really useful. And yeah. So methods, you invoke them, you dot, and then the key name that you put. So if I had named this, not quack, but like talk, then I would want to use the method name. So if I console log the duck, now I see that talk is the key, not quack. Quack is here because that's a variable of this function that I made. But I want to use talk to invoke the method. Yeah?
So if you're invoking a function that's in the object, and you're using dot notation, even though the key is only talk, you can't just do dot talk, you need the parentheses.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, just like in our arrays, length was a property, so we can say like dot length without invoking it. But index of, we couldn't just say dot index of. We needed to invoke it with parentheses to run the function. Great question. Okay, cool. So any other questions on properties and methods and whatnot? Cool. Okay, nested objects. Before I mentioned that you can put an object within an object, a value can be an object for sure within it. So in this example, we have baseball teams, and each baseball team key equals an object that has the location and the team colors. Remember before I said that each key had to be unique, but only within its own object. So we can have location and team colors for each of these inner objects because it's just this object that it needs to be unique between. So if I wanted to put, we have this favorite pond object, and we wanted to put it in our duck. So we can console log duck and console log favorite pond, and both will give us a object. And then if we want to put this object into our duck, we can totally do that. So if we say, and just like before when adding to an object, we can do it with the object literal if we know the object when creating it, that inner object, but we can also add to it with bracket or dot notation. So we can say duck dot favorite or pond equals favorite pond. Then if we console log duck, favorite pond will now be a key inside duck, and the value will be this object. And this can be useful because maybe the values won't be as straightforward as a string or a number, and you want to have these nested objects that belong to the outer object. To access them, again, bracket or dot notation, both work. I can console log duck.favoritePond.name, and it'll give me the name full stack watering hole. Let me comment this out. We can also use bracket notation. Duck, bracket, what else was in favorite pond? Length, oops, favorite pond. Bracket, length. So just as before when you would have like nested arrays, you just have your brackets side by side. And this should give us the length of the pond. And you don't necessarily have to pick one or the other. Maybe I know favorite pond is going to be on there, but I don't know what this next one will be. I can say dot favorite pond bracket length. So you can mix and match. You don't have to use the same one for the whole thing, but definitely try to be consistent when using it. You can also, let's see, duck has a array in it. Yes, I believe so. Accessing other nested objects like an array in it is also totally doable. You can say dot related animals bracket 0, and that will give you the first value in the related animals array. And if you have an object within the array, you know, dot bracket notation, it can be as nested as you want. Any questions on nested objects? Okay, cool. I'm going to stop this.